Oh, hello. Hello, I'm blind.
Peace and blessings. How are you doing?
I'm well. I'm well. Welcome back to the Returnee Diaries.
Thank you.
I'm very excited well, I'm not going to introduce you. I'll let you introduce yourself, but I'm very excited to have you back. You are the inaugural and only guest, most important guest as well. So, uh, yeah, so I'm celebrating the launch of your latest book, which we talked about very briefly in the previous interview. And yeah, it'd be great if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself
Yeah,
again.
that's no problem. Okay, my name is Alpine Tibin. I'm what do you call it? I would say I'm a jellyba, a storyteller, African storyteller, who's been working on rejuvenating and resassing our African ancestral heritage to transmit it to the future generations in a better state of being than it was, untarnished by the fetters of negative images created by the desire to dominate and desecrate our divine heritage, our sacred our sacred ways of being, our cosmologies, which are the ancient philosophies of creation that enable us to live truth and to fulfill our divine destinies on earth. So, I'm putting forth the energy for us to recaptivate that truth and live according to the ways of nature, the ways of Nater, the ways of Ma'at, the ways of truth, and to reclaim our divine inheritance, because what it has been is tarnished, and it has been also vilified, and it's also been disaccurate or inaccurately um, told. So I'm telling the story, our story, and in that essence, I have my new text, which connects to my matrilineal heritage and is written to the glory of our mothers, our grandmothers, and the love of our story. So it's called Broken Coconuts in Our Grandmother's Grave. My grandmother was a great lady. She was very instrumental in creating this family line that we're in right now and making it very vibrant, very enlightened. And yeah, that's the new text. I look forward for everybody to pick up a copy and read it. Learn about the great African women and men who enabled us to be, especially Sierra Leone, and keep on moving forward without all the lies and desecration which have been put there just to dislocate. I would say dislocate our relationship with our ancestors.
Thanks. That's a really great introduction, and I think it helps to kind of contextualize the story. But obviously, you're not going to tell us the entire story. That's for everyone to go out and read. I've really enjoyed reading the book. I'm not going to give anything away. So, but do you want to tell us a little bit about what inspired you?
Okay, yeah, no problem. Oh, 1 second. Can I go get the book actually? I
Yeah,
have it.
sure.
Give me 1 second. I'll be right back. Taste. It says, Kepper's inheritance cannot slip between his fingers. Grandma's voice carries us through the family's origins, retracing both the physical and the spiritual realms. The Ekin are the Kola nuts are ancient divining tools that connect the family to their ancestors. They enable the ancestors to live through the family. The art of storytelling, as perfected by Grandma, is alive and well. How can the broken Kola nuts be put back together? This tale brings forth the first step of this great and wonderful journey. Here you go.
Thank you. Thank you very much. yeah. So
Get the energy circulating. You need to pick it up now. You'll find out those mysteries.
yeah, I had to start reading. So I started reading, and then I realized I need to go to the glossary first.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, to get 'cause there are a few things that, well, quite a few things in there that I needed to kind of understand, and I think it's really helpful that you put glossary in there. And I am not. I've got to admit the consulting the Ekin, that how it's pronounced, Ekin,
Yeah.
is something that completely went over my head. So I realized, in the sense that I've heard my dad say, "You get for look on before you do X, Y, Z," right? I never realized that's what he
Okay. Okay.
meant. I always thought he meant you've got to kind of see how the land lies, but it's not exactly the same thing. So is
Yeah.
it something that you've actually witnessed, like people using cola nuts for divination, or?
Yeah. I have. I have. I
Ah,
actually feel myself too. So I try
okay.
to keep the energy going and keep the lessons learned just moving forward for myself and try to integrate it into my daily not daily but once in a while, especially when you have the ceremonies, aujo, 5 years, 10 years, you try to do a little consultation with the ancestors as much as you can. And yeah, that's what the story is based on, us doing a little consultation with the ancestors and keeping their wisdom alive, so that we could tap into it. So we know that these things, lots of times, these religions or the Western religions are not connecting us to our ancestors because once they're gone, there's nothing else to do. They're just gone. They're in heaven somewhere. Sorry, but in African tradition, we're always consulting with them, and they're always around. And so it's very important to have a tool that is ancestrally mandated to consult with them. We go there and we might talk to them and say some words, but then also doing a little divination is also part of the whole ceremony. It's part of the whole picture, you know. And it's not a chance occurrence. There's nothing by chance. Everything happens according to divine law. We just have to have a way in which we can read the way in which God and the ancestors are communicating with us. And in this circumstance, the ancestors are the ones that motivate the Kolonauts, especially when we're consulting them, to end up the way that they are. And based on the interpretation of the ages and the continuous understanding that's been transmitted, we can have more of a connection with them, more of a link, you know.
So, do you want to tell us a little bit about, or give us maybe like an overview, uh, an outline of what the story is about?
Okay. Yeah, the story is about my grandma. She was always saying, "I remember when they call me Jane Paul," and she would always say that, and that would mean she remembers when she was really at the apex of her life, and she was making things happen. And she was the matriarch of our family. She was taking care of the children. She was a teacher. She was a wife. She was a mother or grandmother. She was also part of the Creole tradition. She was part of the Creole tradition, meaning that she could go claim her descendants back from the Yoruba and the recaptive Africans and free, right? And I know some families who are Igbo, some families are Yoruba. So we're all over, and they all came back to, they're all freed in Freetown when the British Empire decided to interdict the terrorist kidnapping of our people, and they started freeing and freeing the ships, the Portuguese and Spanish ships that were capturing people. They started intercepting them, should I say that, freeing the people in Freetown, right? So that's where the story starts. Starts with, going back to 4 generations. My grandmother's great grandfather, sorry. And from that point on, we traced the lineage through the different generations and their experiences in Freetown. Meaning that the Creoles are the people who founded Freetown from the ancient Temne land, which used to be there initially, and they brought back the Black loyalists from Canada, the Maroons from Jamaica, came later on. It was the Black loyalists and the poor, the British poor that initially founded Freetown, right? The Black poor from England, right? So we start there with the return and the recaptive going back to Freetown, my grandma's ancestor. But then we also have my grandpa's ancestors who were Black Nova Scotians who returned initially as well, so even before that. So in the story, we go even further back. So we're intersecting in time and in space, and we have different stories taking place, different generations, different people, and the history, our story of Sierra Leone at the same time in the background, with all the great heroes and sheroes also included in the story. So we have we can have an intersection of time and space and an understanding of what enabled our ancestors to create what we created, which I think the Creoles are a great example of African unity, because it's all African tribes from all different parts of Africa who were forced to come back together and form one Creole nation, which includes all of these people from all the different parts of Africa. And yeah, it's very interesting because it's a lesson in how we need to come together as well as one people in unity. So that's the major piece of the story, tracing the lineage from Osi Boudou, who's my grandma's aunt's great grandfather, all the way down to her and the different generations and what's been going on, and intersecting that with the divination, the cosmology of the Ife, and also the revolutionary, and also the struggle for independence, right? And from emigrating from Nova Scotia even to Sierra Leone, then going to Europe and going back to Nova Scotia. It's interesting because I'm back in Canada, so it's all together, and that the ancestors manifested through me. And I think nothing happens by mistake, so I have something to do here. And the story is part of what I have to do to reconnect Blacks globally to Africans globally to their cultural unity, how they're really closer than they really think they are.
I've got to say it's really impressive. I think you've done a fantastic job of. I mean, I feel like I've learned so much just reading it myself. Because I think that in terms of the history that I've been able to glean from my parents, say, I wouldn't even say my grandparents, because they weren't alive when I was ready to start asking questions. So the little that I've been able to glean, just from reading and researching myself, and I wouldn't say I've done extensive research. Yeah, it seems like there are sort of echoes of what I've read in your book that I've been exposed to, but I've never consciously really questioned or understood, in fact. I think the way that you just, so would you say that this book does it fall in fiction, or is it semi-autobiographical?
Yeah, it's interesting because if you study books and in the vein of Things Fall Apart and 2000 by Chinua Achebe, or 2000 Seasons by Aikwa Almer, or all the great African authors who I've or whether it's also Ben Okri, The Famished Road. All the great African authors integrate the understanding of linear with the more non-linear, because there's more than linear understanding of the universe in African tradition. We cannot just have a boring, stale old story of these facts and those facts. The facts came into being for a reason, and there's a reason behind those facts, and there's also an exploration of African cosmology, which we need to give a greater understanding of the value of African cosmology, because right now it's a secret that people think is evil, and people don't understand the fullness of it. It's the basis of the binary system that created our computer systems is African, the Ekin system. We can't just gloss over it and say it's something wicked and evil. And at the same time, I think what you're pointing at is an issue as well. There's a very much of a secret behind lots of these non-Christian practices that our parents used to indulge in, right? Because maybe they were ashamed that they'll get caught and people would talk about them negatively. And it was a self-protection device as well through colonialism, because people were persecuted. And that's why things like, even if we look at things like capoeira in Angola, Brazilian tradition, people would pretend as if it was dancing when it really was a martial art, which they would use to protect themselves and maybe even kill the enslavers if they needed to. So there was this self-defensive mechanisms which were in place for lots of these traditional things African people used to do, including the divination, the consulting with the ancestors, which is always, I think, has been the differentiation between African and many Eurocentric ways of being. It's the communion with your ancestors, It's also the case with traditional First Nations in America. Communing with the ancestors has always been something which people have done, regardless of if they took on Christianity, they took on Islam, whatever they did. Then this was the resilient part of African cosmology, which people kept to, So I think, I would say that it's at the intersection of the biographical tale with an incremental dose of cosmology and a deeper understanding of African ways of being that were infused into it, right? So so at the end of the day, I think it's going to bring to the mind of those future generations a deeper understanding, like you said, which they would need to have in order for them to even perceive lots of the things, the awujos and the other things which people are doing, which they really don't understand lots of times. They have a very shallow understanding of these things, and they say, "Oh, it's mom who does it. It's some funny thing." And I think we have an issue that we're not transmitting these things to a future generation because we think these things are futile. But when we go into the future generation's existence, we'll find that these things are critical points between them sustaining themselves and them being totally lost and them being totally miserable, because there's an emptiness with lots of these future generations. They see and they understand lots of times the European piece, but they don't see and understand the African piece. The African piece to them is a mystery, and it shouldn't be a mystery. It should be more so. I think it should be revealed, and it should be revealed from a different perspective. A perspective that shows you the functionality of these African traditions, and how they assisted African peoples to overcome things as big as enslavement, things as big as capitalism, things as big as even what we're going through now, So there you go. I think it's at the intersection. It's up to you to decide. Because the story tells the story, and my grandmother, and what I always say is the methodology of the story employs the methodology of my grandmother. She would always tell us stories with lessons. Now we're gonna say the animal tales she told us. They're valid lessons that enable people to gain wisdom, right,
Yeah.
through them, right? But they're not going to be the literal thing, linear story, which will make you very bored stiff, right? But it's
Yeah.
going to be which is going to interest you and teach you lessons at the same time. So that's the methodology. We needed to put African Sierra Leonean our story in there as well, so people would learn it from a
Mm.
different perspective. Because I read lots of Sierra Leone history is very sometimes very boring and dry, and it's very European. I mean, they're talking about this and situations and dates and people and the revolt of Baibue and stuff, but they don't really get into what might have motivated and what tools these people were using to get these things going. And I think I put that more in there. So I'm do of it what you will. Interpretation is up to the reader, not up to me. I could say that it's a biographical tale with an
Mm.
incremental infusion of cosmological and spirituality that I think people need to learn of.
Okay, I think that's a good good description, a fairly accurate description. I think for me, I think it's always very interesting when 'cause I don't think I've ever seen spirituality kind of being brought in to a story unless it's an African author writing. So I wouldn't I wouldn't even be able to comment on any other types of authors, but it's almost second nature. And for me, I think in my life it's always been the thing hidden behind the veil. Like you know that there's a spiritual dimension. You know you're not really supposed to either talk about it or or think about it, even though it's kind of underpins everything about our culture and our history and our traditions. It's hidden away. And I think back to small things. I'm gonna put my mama on blast now, but like how she used to put water out, like a glass of water out for her. Well, actually, I'm not even sure why. She used to do it every night. And on special days, so like I think maybe my grandmother's birthday, she would, or no, her grandmother's birthday, she would put like her favorite spirit. So
Mm,
a glass of water and spirit. And I was like, it's just something that I remember growing up with, never questioning it. Like, why are you putting water on the dining room table? Nobody's gonna drink it. It's gonna be there in the morning. But okay, we'll just carry on with that. And eventually she stopped doing it. And I think again, I think it's that unease about doing these things that are not quote unquote like purely religious, whichever is it like purely Christian. It's like it's this kind of dark thing in the background. It's
yeah.
cultural, but oh, we're a little bit ashamed of it. So like maybe we'll just stop doing that so we can be good Christians or yeah, and I
Yeah.
think it's interesting how you approach that in the book as well. That the people who are in the know, or who can process that kind of information, they're in the fold and they're trusted. And those who can't, you kind of respect that as well, and you let them be.
Yes. It's the rites of passage in Africa too, and that's the thing. You can't be given a certain degree of knowledge until you go through one rite of passage, because
Mm,
it throw you off. So I think that's what the problem is. We haven't been going through the rites of passages. Been going through lots of wrongs of passage in the West. I like to say it that way. Lots of wrong passages all the time. University is a wrong of passage in the West. It's not a rite of passage. You learn so many negative habits when you go to university, and those negative habits pollute your life and pollute your future, including how to get into relationships. Very polluted. It's not the way in which we traditionally would. So I think that because we haven't been connected to the rites of passage to be given these different levels of knowledge. We haven't been given these different levels of knowledge, which is a warranted thing because people need the rites of passage to get the knowledge, but we weren't given the opportunity to get rites of passage either. So it's not by our fault that we were not given these rites of passage. So for me, it's like it's very important that at least we know that there is not this, this like this one story, like this unique story, and this unique story is even when Africans are writing things, and that's what I give myself the challenge to. I'm writing from the perspective of my ancestor when they came in contact with the colonizer, right?
Mm.
Perspective of the colonizer, and or the perspective of some external force that's going to justify or see Christianity as a blessing for everybody. No, that was not what I was trying to do, because that's not what happened. That's not accurate. So we need to really start questioning how we're telling these stories, and perspective we're telling these stories for, because we don't want a European perspective on even our stories. We want our ancestors' perspective, and that's what happened in terms of the story. And the ancestors came, and I know that people might feel that they are not connected with the ancestors, but sometimes the ancestors are writing the story through you. And I think that's what happened in the story. And so even though people might think, okay, it's fictional, it's this and that, the ancestors had a great say in how I put the story together. And I'm pretty confident that they're very pleased with this story, and that's what's really carrying the story forward. That's what enabled it to get a good publisher, enabled it to come into the world like it is, and enabled us to have it at this time to share with our children. Despite ourselves, our children are going to enjoy the story. They're going to be entertained. All those Lord of the Rings, all those, those stories which integrate lots of those European, whether it's Gothic, whether it's, I don't know, goblins, whatever. Those stories, are stories which people in literature value, right? So we need to value our African mythology and cosmology as much as they value theirs. And this story, it includes the pantheon of our African cosmology into the story as well, because that reality is a reality. Like even in terms of rancho, that was my grandmother who introduced me to the rancho creatures, and she told us stories about the rancho all the time. That's why the rancho is in the story. So we need to take lots of the material in the story is based on the storytelling aptitude of my grandmother, right? So it's really integrating her worldview into the view of the story. And I think that's what we need to do when we write about ancestors. We need to think about their worldview and how they presented that worldview to us, even as children, right?
Well, I'm glad that you are here to tell the story, because honestly, I didn't have a great deal of contact with my grandparents by the time I came along. Yeah, I mean, I never got told stories by them about anything, unfortunately. So I'm glad that you had a closer relationship with yours. I think that's a blessing in and of itself, because that continuity is there, where you can still remember and tell a story to share with all of us. So I'm very grateful for that, and I think you've done a beautiful job as well. So I think you should also think of yourself as a great storyteller, even if you're paying homage to your grandmother. So yeah.
I always tell everybody it took like 9 years to put together, but every time I was writing, it was just like there's more of a connection, and we need to seal these connections, especially for the great grandchildren, future generations who never, like you said, never met the grandparents. They're gonna at least get a feel for the essence of who they were, and the essence of who she was through her stories. I mean, I think I was very privileged because I was closer to her than most of even my other siblings in many ways. Because like story, she my father was gone, and she was playing that role of the second second caregiver when I was born. Right, from that point on, even when we went to Switzerland until she got sick, she was the other person in the house who was the other adult. Right, and she was very close to me in many ways. I mean, I was the one she would tell the most stories to. Because I was the youngest, right? So, so that was the thing. So those stories were very meaningful for me. I mean, even subliminally, I might not remember linearly, but I can remember the feeling, and that feeling kind of generates the atmosphere to tell a story, which is similar, because lots of times it's you, it's not your linear memory, it's you being put into, like when you listen to music, you remember exactly what you were doing when you heard that song. That's the type of non-linear, but the synapses of your mind go back to that experience, and you start writing something based on that experience, which might not be a linear thing where you remember every detail, but you definitely remember the atmosphere, and what you put down is accurate for that atmosphere.
Yeah. I think it's also, yeah, there's a lot going on in your book. I mean, there are a lot of elements to the book, so I think, to the story. So I can well imagine that it took you a while to write it, but I'm sure, I think it's definitely a worthwhile effort. And I think a lot of people are going to enjoy the story. It's interesting, I guess, yeah, drawing from my personal experience, I've never really understood. I know that in my family as well, we have Yoruba heritage, but like other than us, well, some of the people in my immediate family and my extended family having Yoruba names, I don't know. I don't have a story to, like, I don't think I have a story to tell in that respect. I don't know. We just know it's there. It's a fact. And whenever, say I meet a Nigerian person and I tell them, oh, my dad's name is Ayodele. They're like, but why? So just, it's the next question is usually, oh, right, so you're Nigerian, and I said no, we're Sierra Leonean, and then it just starts this whole discussion, and I just don't have answers. Like I could make it up. Genuinely, I'm sorry, I can't give you an explanation.
But it's interesting because my grandmother actually, her father, they traveled, like in the stories, traveled back to Nigeria, and she spoke fluent Yoruba. And I didn't even know, she didn't teach me any of it, but my mom always told me that she was fluent in Yoruba. So she did really reconnect to her source in many ways, which is very interesting because, like you said, lots of Yoruba or Creoles with Yoruba heritage might not reach that deeply to their Yoruba culture by even knowing how to speak the Yoruba language, which interestingly enough has a great percentage of the Creole has Yoruba in it. Lots of the terms which are not English or modified English are Yoruba, and that's also shows you the influence and the amount of Yoruba people who were actually, I think, one of the principal groups of recaptive Africans that were freed in Freetown, right? So it shows you that influence. And lots of the things we do are connected to the Yoruba tradition, whether the Awujo and the Ikin and stuff like that. So we cannot hide those cultural connections, and those cultural connections exist not out of nowhere, but for a specific reason, So yeah, we're part of the Yoruba diaspora, in many ways, and we need to embrace it and really be proud of it because we were one of those resilient Yoruba people who stayed in Africa, who maintained as much of the Yoruba language within Creole, because quite a bit of Creole has the Yoruba language in it, and lots of the Yoruba cosmology and the ancestral Awujos and stuff which we do. So I know that there's lots of other Africans who are part of the Creole tradition who also amalgamated into the Creole and added their essence. So it's not only Yoruba, but a large part of it is connected to the Yoruba tradition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what's great about your stories, it's actually made me think, it's kind of always given me a line of inquiry to look into more things. Could you talk about the pantheon of? I need your. So these are, yeah, so I've heard these names before. I have vague ideas of, I've heard Shango, Ogun part of it.
Yeah, Ogun, yeah.
Yeah. So, and interestingly enough, I think I was watching a program about Salvador, the Bahia in Brazil, and they were talking to these women because apparently one of the dishes that they are famous for is what we call binchaka.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And then they were sharing these women who make it, and I know that they still have those beliefs, and they practice. I don't want to call it a religion, but it's a belief system. Or I don't know. Actually, I think it's a belief system, right? Yeah. And they've also saying that the largest population of Yorubas outside of Nigeria are in Brazil. And they've kept their ways, right? So I was watching this and I was like, oh my goodness. You know, they were making their pinchakara and frying it and all, and I was like, oh my God. And then I saw other dishes that they prepare, which are exactly the same as what we have, like the palm oil stew, and then there's some other bits and pieces. And I thought, oh my goodness, it's
the alele, right? They make the alele too, the moi moi.
Yes, yeah. And I was thinking, wow, it bears it. I think it requires further investigation and looking into the ties are so strong and they're still there. And then I think I must have watched a program about Santeria, and they were also showing, it's almost this kind of hiding in plain sight again, like a bit like capoeira, where on the face of it, it looks like a dance, but really it's a martial art. And with Santeria, I think they were using Catholic saints to represent, yes, the pantheon, right? And it's that kind of, we're doing what we're, we're doing what we're supposed to be doing so we don't get into trouble. But really, we're in our heart of hearts, we're being what we wish we could be if we weren't under the spotlight.
And the thing which is interesting is whether the chicken came before the egg or the egg came before the chicken, because lots of these cosmologies are on the foundation of what lots of Western religions are founded. So I mean, when you talk about Yemoyani, you talk about the Virgin Mary, you see that in Vatican they have the Black Madonna who's all set and Heru and lots of different places, whether in the Vatican and Poland in the Holy of Holies. So it's not hard to reintegrate the pantheon of Orishas or the Neteru and put them under the veil of Christianity, because that's where lots of Christianity came from in the first place. So I mean, we need to, when we get a deeper understanding of these things, and then we infuse our knowledge, because we've done lots of Western education and Sheikh Anta Diop's and all the different John Jackson and all the different scholars, the Sheikh Majarana for men, to get the understanding of the cosmology, so we understand that it even preceded this Christianity and Islam and Judaism. So us really apprehending those figures and putting them into the Western thing and making them like the Santeria is nothing new, because that's what they did with our traditions, and that's how they created their religions. So we need to re-acknowledge our traditions as the source, and then after we can even get a deeper understanding of what they're trying to say with their religions, because their religions did not develop in a vacuum. They developed out of what was written before those religions. And the way in which they've been invigorating those religions it leaves a lot to be wanted, because they've been talking a good talk and not living up to those traditions which were initially ours. And they're all based on ma'at, based on truth, and based on us understanding that we need to use religion to be more divine people. And that's what the foundation of it was, to use it as a tool to become more Christ-like, not to put Christ out there and just worship him, but to become more Christ-like ourselves. So, yeah, I think very interesting that we can dig deep down into the Orishas and the Netaru and the Obasuns and all these African traditions, relate them to the angels and all the different stories, but we need to get a proper understanding of what came first so we can put everything in the right context.
And I think your book will help to do that. I think it will help people who are seeking that knowledge and that truth to understand that it came first. It's not, putting the cart before the horse is not the right way around. So
inspiration, I talked about the inspiration behind the book, the amount of time it took to put the book together. Yeah, I mean, it's organic work. Hopefully, it's going to capture the interest, as well as give you some better understanding of culture, keep you a little on the edge of your seat, and keep you in search of other books, because it's a stimulation for you to go in search of learn some more about African cosmology, get a little bit more into African rituals, and find out what they really mean. Because we haven't had the rites of passage and been introduced to the divination tools and all the different things which we need to be introduced to, then I think that there's very much of disharmony in our lives. And these things, even in situations which are chaotic, these things bring harmony. These divination tools, these divination cosmologies, they bring harmony because we connect with our ancestors, and we know that through them, because we're our living ancestors, through them, we can have solace and peace and harmony, and we can get a better understanding of how to move forward in our lives. And that's the value of our ancestors, because when we look at our ancestors, we look at eternity. We look at going back to the ancestors of the ancestors being the creator, the creatress herself. So we have an infinite source of wisdom, of solace, of peace, of harmony, and we need to tap into it more, because especially in the moments of our lives where we're going through chaos, they can be a centering and a focal point. And that's what in the story it talks about. I mean, we connected to our ancestors is key. When we're connected to somebody else's ancestors and we go searching for somebody else's ancestors, it's not really going to help us as much as it could. It's going to actually probably bring us more to a state of being dominated and being subjected to the harms of that other person. Because you can't go to your oppressor's ancestors and expect to get freedom from the oppressor's ancestors, because they were even probably worse than the oppressor himself. They had a vested interest in oppressing our people, and that's what they were doing.
Yeah. One of the themes that you cover is, I don't want to say it's an idea, but actually it's probably better if you explain it. Ancestors returning, I suppose, going to the spiritual realm and returning through the generations. That's something that I've not come across before.
People think that the names just come out of nowhere. Babajide. I mean, there's a specific cosmology behind it. Yetunde, Babatunde, Yetunde. Those terms all mean the father comes back, the mother comes back, this and that comes back. And it's not just, out of the, you see, everything in cosmology, lots of times based on divination, right? And us understanding that we are eternal beings is key. And this is a foundation of science. Energy just changes from form to form. It never disappears, it dissipates. Just like our essence is not even energy, our essence is divine. So, this aspect of understanding of the universe and the cosmology of Africa, much like the cosmology of the Indus Kush people, is about reincarnation, right? And the book touches on that and touches on how people understand that the ancestors would return to the realm of the living. So, in our tradition, there's always, when you transition into the realm of the ancestors, okay, and you could come back into the lineage of your descendants, and that lineage would be uplifted by you returning. So it's not, death is not a finality in African tradition, or in my understanding and African understanding. Death is a transition from one realm to the next, and from the realm of the ancestors, we return to the realm of the living at the appropriate time, which is mandated by the Ancestral Council and by Neter. So that is something which, through divination, people could say, okay, this is your father who's returning from that lineage. So you'll give him the name, Babatunde, which literally means father comes back, right? Yetunde means mother comes back. And there's other names around, different people coming back into the realm of the living. So we need to really get into a deeper understanding of that. And it's more something whereby which the wisdom holders, the diviners, will have access to that insight and that information. And us coming back to the world is nothing new. We have lessons which we learned, and we have past life memories which we have, which we can tap into, not linearly, but we can tap into with the assistance of ritual and of divination. And these are things which have been part of the African tradition from since the dawn of time. Understanding that, and using that to our benefit. Because at the end of the day, it breaks down to that law of science, that immutable law, that energy doesn't die, it just goes from form to form and transitions. Just like we transition from the ancestral plane, the plane of the living, to the ancestral plane back to the plane of the living. And this is like in African tradition, there is no death. The example is that a river runs its course and it gets polluted, it gets cleaned out, then it comes back, right? So our physical body eventually is that river that gets polluted, gets tarnished, it can no longer go, and therefore our spirit needs to go. And then after that, after a period of time, spirit comes back through a new birth. And based on how we lived our previous life, that's why we also have people who we call old spirits, people who are born and you give birth to your mother. And literally, people will think, oh, it's just a joke, it's a cute thing to say. But these people are mature babies. And these people are mature children, right? These are people who have more of an understanding from their past existence than other people might have, right? Because they've lived according to their truth, and they've retained more of that truth. So that's something which we need to really understand and work with, and really it brings more value to our children as well, right? Because we understand our children are our ancestors. So it makes it even more important for us to convey that information and be able to uplift them, just like we would want them to uplift us when we return. Oh, and that's the thing. There's the like I say in the book, the realm of perceiving in the mind and how the mind works. They enslave us to this linear understanding of the universe, and then everything else is highly questioned apart from that information, which is very linear. And the thing is that science proves the existence of lots of these things which we're debating in our mind. It's just that we haven't been initiated to the levels of that scientific awareness. Just like how the know about all the invisible stars without the Galileo's telescope. These are part of things which intrinsically in African tradition, we are more open to these realities. Therefore, we have a better understanding of these things. There's more of really a humility in the minds of the people. We don't know everything.
Yeah.
The source of all knowledge is divine, and these things we imagine are possible. You know, the imagination is just something which is demonstrating alternate realities. You know, there are people who see spirits, people who see auras, people who see different things who are seen as crazy, but they're very spiritual people. And in Africa, they would be maybe they would be diviners, maybe they would be priests and priestesses in African traditional society. So it's really in the West, mental health is really a big issue because people don't understand the mind. You know, if people understood the mind better, I'm sure they would have better mental health remedies for people who have visions, people who see things, people who I think are more spiritually in tune. You know.
Yeah.
And on that note, we like to say peaceful transition to Mawadoma Some, because he was opening the way to lots of people getting into that African cosmology. And I think he transitioned a couple of days ago. And I wish him a good journey into the ancestral plane. And knowing the knowledge that he had, I know he'll be returning sometime in the future with more knowledge to bring us. So that's the type of thing which we need to really understand. That's why death is not that much of a big issue in our tradition. You know, that's why people are celebrated. People know that it's not a finality, that, you know, it's a transition. And that the physical body, I mean, that's why people can enjoy more so when people transition, because people are aware of that as well. So we need to have a deeper understanding. In the book, transition is treated not as a finality, but as a transition. And of course, the understanding of the ancestors coming back is wide awake in there. You know, you go to, it's like you go to sleep at night and you come back in the morning. You know, that's what happens. You go to sleep, transition, and you come back when you wake up, and that's we need to see it. So once we see it that way, we are less submitted to grief, and we're more submitted to better spiritual tapping into the spiritual realm, so we can better understand why the ancestors, what the meaning of their existence was, and even have a better understanding on when they come back, like your auntie coming back to your grandmother and coming to tell her. That's something which is part of African tradition. You know, it's not something which people would say is you know, people would say, oh, that's just, yeah, take it with a grain of salt. That's some type of, somebody made up something. Just like this story right here. People say, oh, you made up a whole bunch of stuff, this and that. But at the end of the day, who are you to say? You know, you weren't in the experience. You don't understand the fullness of the cultural sciences of Africa, and all the things which people see as reality in Africa. Lots of them are seen as fantasy over here. And they write fantasy tales, and they are probably the books that sell the most. Whether it's the Lord of the Rings, whether it's this and that, that's the type of stuff which they really embrace, and then they try to tell us, no, that's garbage, you know. So let's get back into that stuff. Let's make sure we put that stuff on a pedestal. We become humble to the fact that we don't know it all, and that what is the imagination lots of times is something which can be manifested on Earth through the proper sciences. And let's open our mind to the African way, which is to be open to all aspects of truth, and to be humble in what we know, and to tap into divine tools, divination tools. You see, when you tap into the oracle, it's stating your humility, I don't know it all. You know, I'm not all knowing. There are certain things which are beyond my scope of consciousness. I can humble my thoughts and submit myself to the will of the divine if I need to, and get some insights which are beyond what I think things might be. And that's an act of humility, because within our mind, within our thoughts is not the universe. The universe is within the Akashic records and the mind of Neter and the ancestors. So we need to have that as an assisting tool on a day-to-day basis, and it'll make our lives much more better. And our ability to deal with ill consequences or adversity will also increase triple-fold.
Excellent. I think that is probably a great place to close. Thank you very much for coming on. Thank you for your patience as well.
No problem.
Yeah, I was also going to say, just it's wonderful to see Kriya written down. But I genuinely don't think I've ever really seen it written down before.
Oh, great.
So yeah, see it written down and to just hear it in my, I guess in my mind. Brilliant. And I hope, I think it would be lovely to see more Creole literature. So I don't know. Who knows? Do you think book number? Do you
No,
think
because there's another book coming out. It's coming out. It's already in the process of
Oh,
being done.
ooh.
But this book is actually taking us back to my previous experience in ancient Kemet. So it's going to be a Kemetic tale.
Ah. Oh my goodness. You're prolific. Hats off to you.
Oh,
And I'm glad that you're prolific
I can
because
tell you that
you know,
Hatshepsut is in the story. Hatshepsut, the first woman to rule Kemet as a man, as a pharaoh. And she was the inspiration behind that tale.